Dust hung in the air like a golden veil as Ethan Cole rode down the main road toward the heart of Redstone Market, a small trading town tucked between rolling hills and the edge of the desert. His horse, a dark chestnut named Duke, trotted slow and steady, its hooves kicking up the kind of dust that clung to a man's boots and stayed with him for miles. Ethan's coat was faded from years of sun and wind, and his hat was pulled low over his eyes. He looked like a man who had seen too many miles and too few smiles. It had been 3 long weeks since he'd left the ranching plains of Texas, driving a small herd of cattle north to sell. The market here was known for fair prices and good trade. He wasn't expecting anything beyond that, just to sell, buy supplies, and ride on before the next storm rolled in. Life on the trail had taught him not to expect surprises. It was simpler that way. When he finally reached the heart of the town, the sight hit him like a different kind of wind life, color, laughter. Stalls lined both sides of the street, overflowing with goods. Bright woven cloths, baskets of peaches, smoked meats, and the sharp scent of leather. Women bartered, children laughed, and men swapped news about cattle prices and distant ranches. It had been months since Ethan had seen this much life in one place, and for a brief moment he felt like a stranger among the living. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thud. Duke snorted, tossing its mane as Ethan tied the reins to a post. His gray eyes scanned the crowd, careful, distant, measuring. A habit of a man who had spent too long watching his back. He tipped his hat to a merchant and started toward the livestock pens where he could make his trade. Ethan spoke little as he negotiated prices. His voice was low and calm, steady like a river current. The traders respected that. They saw a man who kept his word. By noon, his business was nearly done. He had silver in his pocket, feed for his horse, and a list of supplies to buy before heading out again. Everything was as it always was, quiet, efficient, emotionless until he saw her. It happened just as he turned toward the far row of stalls. Sunlight spilled through a gap in the awnings, glinting off copper pots and glass jars. And there she was, a young woman standing behind a small stall covered in flowers and herbs. Her dress was simple, pale blue, and her hair shimmered like wheat under the sun. She was laughing softly with an old woman over a handful of lilac blossoms. Something about that laugh hit Ethan harder than a bullet. It wasn't just the sound, it was the warmth in it. The life he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt that kind of pull toward anyone. Since his wife had died 3 years ago, he'd sworn off caring. Love, he told himself, was a weakness a man couldn't afford twice, but in that moment, something deep within him shifted. He stood there, silent among the bustle, watching her tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. She moved with a grace that didn't belong in the dusty chaos of the market. For reasons he couldn't explain, his heart started to beat faster. The world around him, the shouting vendors, the creaking wagons, the clucking chickens, all seemed to fade. For a fleeting second, all he saw was her. Ethan took a slow breath, forcing himself to look away. "You're just tired, Cole," he told himself. "Trade your goods, get your supplies, and ride out before sunset." But even as he walked away, his thoughts didn't. He didn't know her name. He didn't know why she'd looked like sunlight itself standing there among the flowers. All he knew was that for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he wanted to keep riding. The next morning, the sun rose warm and soft over Redstone Market, spilling gold across the rooftops and wooden stalls. The town was already alive with noise, the clatter of wagon wheels, the calls of traders, the smell of fresh bread and roasting coffee. Ethan Cole, usually up before dawn, stood beside his horse outside the small inn where he'd spent the night. He told himself he was only heading to the market to buy feed and supplies for the trail. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to see her again. He rode slowly into town, heart heavy with something he couldn't name. He had spent years avoiding attachment, shutting out anything that could make him feel. But now, One glance from a girl he hadn't even spoken to had left a mark he couldn't shake. He dismounted and made his way through the crowd, pretending to study the goods, but his eyes searched for the flower stall, and there she was, Clara Bennett. Though he didn't yet know her name, was arranging fresh blooms on her stall, daisies, lilacs, and wild roses she'd likely picked that morning. A small smile curved her lips as she brushed dust from the petals. There was something different about her, an ease, a quiet joy that didn't seem to belong in a place as hard and weary as this. Ethan lingered at a nearby leather stand, pretending to inspect saddlebags, though his gaze kept drifting toward her. He felt foolish, like a boy again. He told himself he'd just pass by, maybe say a polite word, and move on, but fate had other plans. A sudden shout cut through the market noise. A horse had broken loose from its hitch. Wild-eyed and charging through the crowd, the animal's hooves thundered against the ground, scattering crates and people alike. Panic rippled through the stalls as vendors dove for cover. Ethan looked up just in time to see the runaway horse barreling straight toward Clara's stall. Without thinking, he moved in a flash. Ethan sprinted through the chaos, his boots pounding the dirt. Clara froze, clutching her basket of flowers, unaware of the danger closing in. Ethan reached her just as the horse drew near. Grabbing her by the waist and pulling her out of the way, the beast thundered past, smashing into a few barrels before being caught by its owner. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Clara's heart raced against Ethan's chest. Her breath came in quick, startled gasps. He looked down at her, eyes wide, sunlight caught in her hair, and felt something stir deep in him, something both fierce and fragile. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low and rough from years of silence. She blinked up at him, still catching her breath. No, I'm fine," she managed, her cheeks flushing with color. "Thank you, I didn't even see it coming." He released her gently, stepping back, his gloved hands trembling just slightly. "You should be more careful," he said softly. Though there was a faint smile tugging at his lips, Clara glanced down at her crushed basket of flowers and sighed. "Seems I'll have to start over." Then, looking back up at him, her expression softened. "I owe you more than thanks, Mister." Ethan tipped his hat awkwardly. "Just glad you're safe, ma'am." She hesitated, then picked a small white flower from the few unbroken stems and held it out to him. "Then take this. For luck on your travels." He almost refused. He didn't believe in luck, but something in her eyes made him accept. He tucked the flower into his coat pocket, nodding once, "Much obliged." As he turned to go, Clara watched him walk away, wondering why a stranger's calm voice and steady hands had left her heart unsteady. And Ethan, walking through the crowd, felt the faint scent of that flower with every step, stirring something he thought he'd buried long ago. For the first time in years, he didn't feel quite so alone. The days that followed felt strangely different for Ethan Cole. He told himself his business in Redstone was nearly finished, his herd sold, his supplies packed, his trail northward waiting. Yet, every morning, something in him kept delaying the saddle cinch. There was always a reason to linger, an item he'd forgotten to buy, a tool that needed repair, a horse that deserved one more day of rest. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wasn't staying for trade. He was staying for Clara Bennett. The market had become his quiet ritual. He'd stroll through the wooden stalls at dawn, his hat tilted low, pretending to browse. But his eyes were always drawn to her flower stall. Clara would be there, arranging bunches of fresh blooms, daisies for cheer, lavender for calm, and wild roses that carried the faint scent of the nearby hills. Each morning she greeted him with a soft smile that made the dust and noise of the market seem to fade away. "Back again, Mr. Cole?" She'd tease one morning as she tied ribbons around a bouquet. He shrugged, leaning against a post. "Market's got better prices than I'm used to," he said. Though both of them knew that wasn't why he came, their talks began short and simple, about the weather, about horses, about how early she had to rise to pick flowers before the sun grew too hot. But each day, their conversations lingered a little longer. Clara learned that Ethan had once worked cattle for a ranch down near Abilene, that he preferred quiet places, and that he hadn't seen much of home in years. Ethan, in turn, learned that Clara's mother had passed long ago and that she helped her aging father run a small farm just beyond the ridge. She sold flowers and herbs in the market to make ends meet, and though her life was modest, she spoke of it with light in her eyes. There was something healing in her laughter, something honest in the way she saw the world. Ethan, who had spent years avoiding people, found himself drawn to that warmth like a cold man to a fire. He started helping her carry baskets in the mornings, fixing a broken cartwheel when it jammed, even whittling her a wooden handle for her flower shears. "You don't talk much, do you?" she asked one afternoon as he worked quietly beside her. "Not unless there's something worth saying," he replied, glancing at her with a faint smile. Clara laughed, her eyes sparkling. "And is there something worth saying now?" He hesitated, his gaze lingering on her face. "Plenty," he said softly. "Just not sure I've got the right words." That moment hung between them like sunlight through glass warm. Fragile, full of things unspoken, but not everyone in Redstone saw their growing closeness with kindness. Gossip in a small town spread faster than wildfire. Some whispered that the lonely cowboy had his eye on the flower girl. Others hinted that it wasn't proper for her to spend so much time with a drifter. Clara heard the whispers but tried to ignore them. Still, some nights, she found herself wondering what future there could be between a man who lived on the trail and a girl tied to a small patch of land. Ethan sensed her worry one evening. As the market closed and the last rays of sun painted the street gold, he stopped by her stall with a small bunch of wildflowers he'd picked himself. "For tomorrow," he said, setting them down gently. Clara looked up, surprised. "You brought me flowers?" He nodded. "Figured it's about time someone gave you some." Her heart warmed at that. No grand promises, no pretty words. Just quiet kindness, the kind that spoke louder than anything else as the lanterns flickered to life across the market. Ethan walked her home along the ridge road. The world around them was still, painted in the soft glow of twilight. Neither said much, but both felt the same quiet truth blooming between them, something neither had expected and neither wanted to lose for the first time since his wife's passing. Ethan realized he wasn't looking for a place to leave anymore. He was looking for a reason to stay. The market had begun to feel like home for Ethan Cole. Each morning, the sun would warm the dusty streets, and the sound of Clara Bennett's laughter would drift through the stalls, weaving itself into his day. For a while, it seemed as if the world had finally softened around him, as if the years of loneliness and loss could be erased by small, tender moments. But peace, Ethan knew too well, was often temporary. It came in the form of a familiar shadow across the sun-baked road. Luke Harding, Ethan's former partner from years on the trail, rode into town with a swagger that carried more menace than charm. His boots thudded against the wooden planks of the inn's porch, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, immediately sought Ethan among the throng of market-goers. Luke's arrival was no coincidence. He had spent the past years running a life of reckless mischief, and it seemed he had come to remind Ethan of the past he couldn't escape. Ethan saw him before Clara did. His hand instinctively went to the back of his coat, but he relaxed when he remembered the gun remained in its holster at the inn. Luke, however, didn't need weapons to stir trouble. His voice rang out as he called Ethan over, loud enough for the nearby vendors to hear. "Well, well, look who's gone soft. The lone cowboy turned flower boy, eh?" Clara, arranging her flowers, froze. She turned just in time to see Ethan stepping forward, tension lining his shoulders. His jaw tight, her heart sank when she caught the exchange. But she didn't yet understand the history between the two men. Luke continued, his words sharp and mocking, trading cattle, cozying up to pretty little girls. Never thought I'd see the day you'd waste your life like this, Cole. Thought you were made for the trail, for freedom. But here you are, playing house in a dusty little market. Ethan's response was calm but controlled. Luke, I don't want trouble. You're welcome to leave before I make you. But Luke's gaze fell on Clara. And what's this? Didn't know a cowboy could care for more than himself. You planning on tying her down like the rest of the townsfolk? You think you can leave your past behind? Clara's hands trembled as she realized the implications. Ethan's past, something he had never shared with her, loomed suddenly over their tender days. Fear and confusion washed over her. Could the man she had begun to care for truly be free of the shadows she now glimpsed? Her mind raced with questions, doubt gnawing at the hope she had felt. Ethan's eyes darkened. My past is my own, he said quietly. Though the firmness in his voice left no room for argument. It doesn't define who I am now, Luke sneered. We'll see about that. People always have a way of catching up to you. Cole, before Ethan could respond further, Luke mounted his horse and rode off. Leaving a cloud of dust and tension behind him, Clara stood frozen, processing what she had just seen. Ethan, sensing her distress, stepped toward her. Clara, he began. But the words faltered. She backed away, her eyes wide with hurt. I don't know if I can. I don't know who you really are, she whispered. Her voice trembling. The faith she had begun to place in him wavered, and the warmth of the market seemed suddenly cold. Ethan wanted to reach for her, to explain, to promise that he was no longer the man Luke had known, that he was nothing like his past, but the fear of losing her trust before he had fully earned it kept him silent. He knew he couldn't just wave away the shadows of his life. They were real, and their impact could not be undone with words alone. Oh, he did the hardest thing he had done in years without another word. He turned away and walked toward the inn, each step heavy with regret. Clara's eyes followed him. The hurt deepening their bond, fragile and blooming, had been shaken, and as Ethan rode out the next morning, leaving town with the weight of both his past and her doubt pressing on him, he realized that winning Clara's heart would require more than kindness. It would require courage, honesty, and a reckoning with the life he had once tried to leave behind. Weeks passed in Redstone, and the market felt emptier without Ethan Cole's steady presence. Clara Bennett moved through her days with quiet melancholy, arranging flowers and tending to customers, but her mind kept drifting to the rugged cowboy who had once brought warmth into her world. She tried to tell herself that he had only been passing through, a brief flicker of excitement that had now vanished, but the ache in her chest told her otherwise. She missed the quiet strength in his eyes, the unspoken kindness in his actions, and the gentle way he had protected her from a runaway horse. Ethan, on his end, had ridden hard and far, his heart heavy with regret. He could not bear the thought of leaving Clara's trust and affection unclaimed. Yet he was unsure how to face her after his past had cast doubt on everything they had begun to build. Nights on the trail became longer, colder, and lonelier than they had ever been before. Memories of Clara's laughter haunted him more than any ghost from his former life. The realization hit him with painful clarity. He had not just come to town for trade. He had come to find a reason to stay, and in leaving, he had abandoned the one person who had made him believe in love again then. The news arrived. Clara's father had fallen gravely ill. The small farm outside town depended on his strength, and without him, the household would struggle. Clara set out alone to fetch medicine from the next town, determined and brave, yet unaware of the dangers the journey posed. Her wagon hit a rocky patch of road, jolting violently before tipping into a shallow ditch. Panic surged through her as the rain began to pour, soaking her through, her wagon immobilized. Alone and frightened, she feared what might happen if help did not come soon. It was at that moment that Ethan appeared, galloping through the storm like a man sent by fate itself. Mud splattered his boots and coat, and rain slicked his hair, but his eyes burned with purpose. He leapt from his horse and waded through the mire toward Clara. Without a word, he helped her out of the wagon, steadying her and shielding her from the harsh rain. The sight of him, wet and determined, was enough to bring tears to her eyes, not from fear, but from relief. I thought I lost you," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan shook his head. Brushing the rain from his face, "You'll never lose me," he said, voice low but firm. "I left because I was afraid my past would hurt you. But nothing, not storms, not mistakes, not the life I've lived, could keep me away from you." The storm raged around them, but in the small shelter of the overturned wagon, they shared warmth and understanding. Ethan confessed everything, his past with Luke, the regrets that had shadowed him, and the truth that he had never stopped thinking about her. "I came here to trade cattle," he admitted, "but I left my heart at your stall. And I've spent weeks regretting that I didn't stay sooner." Clara, her fear replaced by a fragile hope, reached for his hand. "I don't care about your past," she said softly. "I care about who you are now, and I can see the man you've become." They rode back together as the rain eased, Ethan guiding the wagon safely toward home. Each mile brought them closer, not just physically, but emotionally. As the walls they had both built around their hearts began to crumble, the storm outside mirrored the turmoil they had endured. Yet in its wake, there was clarity, forgiveness, and love. By the time they reached the farm, the sun had broken through the clouds. Redstone streets glistened under the light, but neither of them noticed the market nor the bustle of townsfolk. All that mattered was the bond they had renewed, tested by fear, distance, and doubt, but ultimately unbroken. For the first time in years, Ethan felt whole again, and Clara knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Love had been tested, but it had endured. And in that endurance, a new beginning awaited. Spring had returned to Redstone, painting the market in shades of green and gold. The once dusty streets now shimmered under the warmth of the sun, flowers spilling from every stall in brilliant colors, and the chatter of merchants and townsfolk filled the air like music. It was a season of renewal, and for Ethan Cole and Clara Bennett, it symbolized more than just nature's rebirth. It marked the beginning of their life together. Ethan no longer walked through the market as a lone, cautious cowboy. He moved beside Clara, steady and confident, a quiet smile softening the rugged lines of his face. Their flower stall had grown, offering more than herbs and blooms. It had become a small sanctuary in the heart of town. Baskets of daisies, roses, and lavender adorned the wooden counters, and the scent of freshly picked flowers mingled with the earthy aroma of the market, drawing in customers who admired the beauty and warmth of the pair behind the stall. Clara worked with ease, her hands moving deftly among the blooms, arranging bouquets and offering them with a gentle smile. Ethan helped with the heavier work, lifting crates, repairing broken baskets, and always finding time to steal a glance at her. He still carried the quiet strength that had drawn her in weeks ago, but now it was paired with tenderness and a sense of belonging he had never known before. Their love, once fragile and tested by past shadows, had deepened through hardship. Ethan had faced his former life and Luke's threats, and Clara had seen the courage and honesty that defined the man he had become. Now their bond was unshakable, built on trust, forgiveness, and shared dreams. Together, they had carved out a space where love could grow, not hidden or fleeting, but strong and steady like the roots of the trees lining the market square. As the day went on, townsfolk stopped to greet them, children tugged at Ethan's coat to hear stories of the trail, and neighbors asked Clara for advice on planting and flowers. The couple responded with laughter and warmth, seamlessly blending into the rhythm of market life. Yet, amid the bustle, there was a quiet understanding between them, a language of glances, gentle touches, and smiles that spoke more than words ever could. Later, as the market began to wind down and the golden light of the setting sun bathed the streets. Ethan and Clara stepped back to admire their small empire. He leaned close, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and she rested her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd find a reason to stay in one place," he admitted. His voice low and sincere. Clara tilted her face up to him, her eyes sparkling with the same warmth that had first drawn him to her. "And yet here you are," she said softly. "Home isn't just a place. Ethan, it's where your heart feels safe. You found you are here with me." He smiled, a deep, contented smile that carried the weight of years of wandering and longing. "I've found more than that," he said. "I found peace, I found love, I found you." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the market lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the stalls and the couple standing hand in hand. The noise of the town, once a blur of chaos, now felt like music, celebrating the simple joy of life and love. In that moment, the past no longer haunted them. The trials, fears, and doubts had all shaped the path that brought them here, and now there was only the promise of tomorrow. Redstone Market had been the place where Ethan's heart had been stirred, tested, and ultimately healed. It had been where he met Clara, saved her, lost her, and found her again. And now, standing together, surrounded by the scents, colors, and life of the town, they knew that the market was not just a place of trade, but a place of beginnings, hope, and enduring love. Together, they turned to greet the last customers of the day, ready to face the future with hearts open, hands intertwined, and a love that would grow stronger with each passing season. For Ethan and Clara, the market had become more than a livelihood. It was the foundation of their new life, a life full of laughter, warmth, and endless possibilities.